Brandon, when he was born, he was a big baby, almost 10 pounds. Growing up, he was such a good kid, such a role follower. His passion was football, family, and food. He loved food, and he was a great football player. My son Brandon passed away on October 19th, 2022, due to fentanyl poisoning. In elementary, he was doing fine, and mid-school is when he met his friends, and they met in math honors class because Brandon did love math too. He was great at math. And so he met his friends in middle school in math honors, and he later on in high school with those same friends, he started using with those same friends in the 10th grade. His friends in middle school, they had said that when they get to high school, they are going to explore. They're going to explore drinking, weed, and girls, and things like that. And so they did. So they decided that ninth grade, let's not try it because let's get the feel for high school. And then in 10th grade is when we noticed that Brandon had shifted with his moods. At first, I thought that it was hormones because being a teenager, and we just don't know. I didn't know because I remember with high school, when I was in high school, it was not very easy. I was just trying to fit in and things like that. And so that's what I thought with Brandon. But little did I know that he had started experimenting with his friends and in the 10th grade. We knew something was going on, me and his dad. Even though me and his dad have been divorced since Brandon was 2, and he has an older brother. Brandon has an older brother because I have 2 boys. So Brandon did say, "Mom, I didn't mean to become an addict. It just happened." And it just started just innocently. Mom just started with me and my friends, we started with alcohol, then weed, and it escalated, Mom, but I didn't mean to become an addict. People don't choose to become addicts. It happens. Well, he actually got caught in the high school parking lot drinking with his friends, and me and his dad got called in to go pick him up because he was at a hospital. And so that's when we started doing like the outpatient and counseling, but Brendan didn't care for counseling. There was always something that he would find that he didn't care for counseling. And so we just tried to work with him as best as we could, but we did notice his grades slipping from a math honor student, from a great student, to just things that just didn't seem quite right. But of course, being a single parent too, because, you still have to work. Um, and I feel like I wasn't there. I should have been there for him. I feel like I should have been there for him. And I could have done something but I had to work. Like, we don't have choices. So bills still come in. And so I just I feel bad for us single parents because we don't have a choice. We have to go out there and make a living for our kids. Brendan didn't manage to graduate high school. I did pull him out of the old high school because his friends were there. And I put him in another high school where he did end up graduating high school. So we're really proud of him, even though he didn't want to walk in with his cap and gown. I just remember driving him to the high school, and then he got off the vehicle, and then he came back with his diploma, and he said, "Look, Mom, I got my diploma." So I took him to go eat somewhere, but of course he just wanted to go to the drive-through because those are like, if I think back, when the addiction started for Brandon, um, things were changing for him. Like, he no longer was interested in go like for family gatherings, and he was mostly wanting like to go with his friends or be in his room. Just things like that that shifted, that I now I think about it, like, like there some signs were there. But you go on with your life thinking it's going to be all right, it's going to be fine. But for some of us, it's not going to be okay. We're going to lose our kids. Like, I lost my kid, and I didn't even know that I was going to lose my son. The discussion was always an ongoing thing, and he just started developing also like a mental illness on top of his addiction. And so we sent him to a mental behavioral um, inpatient place, and outside of New Mexico, somewhere. And he came back worse because he said, "Mom, thanks for taking me over there. And because you know what? If you see what I learned over there, I learned how to make homemade drugs there. That's what I learned over there." So, like, when he came back, we were seeing different weird, awkward things in his room, like little particles of plastics. I don't know, little homemade stuff that he was making. And it was just mind-boggling that he sends somebody to get help, and then they come back worse than what they were. Here in New Mexico, it was really hard to find a bed for Brandon. Um, there were always like waiting lists, like, we'll have your son be put on a waiting list in 2 weeks, we'll have one, and this one we'll have it in a month. And if you have ever lived with an addict, you know that if you they wait for help, they're not gonna want it. It's gonna happen where they're just not gonna want it anymore. So then we decided to go out of state, and we called a few places, and he ended up in Austin, Texas in 2020. And for the most part, he did good. He did get kicked out of some rehabs. I mean, he really did. I'm just not gonna sugarcoat it. Um, but there was one that he did better at, and then he went on to a sober living, but then he did get kicked out of that sober living for doing some stuff that he shouldn't have been doing. But then he tried an rehab again, and then another sober living, and he did end up staying in Austin for about a year, and we were really proud of him. We did not see him for about a year because he was in Austin, so we did just make phone calls and check up on him, see how he was doing. Um, but he decided that he wanted to come back to New Mexico because he missed his family, so he did end up coming back. Yeah, so he ended up, when he came back from Austin, he came back to live with me. And the agreement was, I told him, "Brandon, if you live with Mom, you cannot drink or get back into your addiction. You can't do that. You gotta be following the rules." And he did do that, but I noticed that 4 months went by, and I started finding liquor in his car and in his room. Then it started getting worse. Yes. And so I ended up having to sadly throw him out. And then we would try to work it out. Then he'd come back, and then again, and I'd have to send him off again. And it just, I just, because it, it's just a really hard situation when because I was diagnosed with cancer, so I've had 5 surgeries. And I just told him, just do it for mom, try to stay straight for mom. But addicts can't do that. It's hard. You can't just tell them just stop using because they feel like they need that drug or they need the alcohol. And so
They need that whatever it
is that they need, they're going to get it, no matter how sick a parent can be. I mean, I know that he was trying his best, but an addiction is really evil and it's hard on them because they're not themselves. That's Brandon was not the Brandon that I knew. He was a very different person. And that was really sad to see that my beautiful son was in there somewhere. But I had to deal with so much, like the arguing and then not getting along. And then the late nights that I'd have to wait for him. And it was just it's very hard living with an addict. But you love them no matter what. You love them unconditionally because you love them and you want them to get better. In 2022, when he reached out to me and said, "Mom, I need help," because he wasn't living with me, and that was good to hear. So he came to my mom and my dad's house, and we talked about and his dad helped out, and his dad and his wife helped out getting him to a facility in Denver. So he ended up going to a rehab in Denver where he did well. And then he came back. I believe it was only 30 days, and we asked him to do more, but 30 days is what he wanted to do. So then me and his dad drove over to Denver to get him, and then we brought him back to New Mexico. Then we put him in a sober living where he did not like it at all because he said that sober living, like you have to like be you come out of rehab, then they give you a title that you need to do. You need to either be the president, vice president, treasurer or something. Then you have to watch videos to know what you're doing. And then you got to find a job quick or else you're dismissed. So that didn't work out. Too much pressure. He said, "Mom, this is too much pressure for me. I just got out of a rehab. I can't do this." And so Brandon ended up homeless, staying, and he'd rather have stayed in his car. So he was homeless. And he did have a job. He worked for a senior living home with senior citizens, and he did the graveyard shift from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. And he really loved it there, and they loved him there too. They just thought that he was this big teddy bear guy that would go and hug them, and they just loved him. The senior citizens just loved him so much. And so they they didn't even know that he had fallen into addiction, but they didn't even know he was homeless, living out of his car. And then in the morning he would come and I would hear the door and it would be Brandon. "Mom, I'm here. Do you want to have coffee?" And then we'd have coffee and it was great to see him. Then we'd spend time together until it was time for him to go to work. And then he would park his car again at the park, and that's where he would sleep because he had rather be homeless, like he said, than being at that sober living place. And he knows with me and him, like how he said, it's just not going to work with me and you, Mom, but I'm older now. I have to try to make it on my own. So I can't be here with you anymore anyway. And it's not going to work. So, I give him a lot of credit for validating that, and so he did find another sober living place, and the the men were really great, but the problem there was that there was too many of them. There was like 10 to one little house, 10 men to one little house. And it wasn't really the cleanest place, but that's all he can afford. And so he had to go, like there were bed bugs on the beds, and um he had to hide his bites because he had to keep his job. And it was really hard on him. And he finally saved up for his own apartment, which we're very happy that he was very proud of himself too, that that was a great accomplishment. And so he ended up moving in to his apartment. He wasn't there very long though, um, because he ended up passing away. But the way Brandon was found was he was found in his apartment, but he was scheduled to go to work the next day. So that's why, it was people couldn't locate him. Like where was Brandon? He was always punctual at work. He loved his job. They loved him. And they were trying to call him. They were calling him to see if he could fill in for someone, because he was really good at filling in. He really validated what he did there. And so there was no answer, and so they they were concerned. And it so happened that Brennan had passed away in the morning on October 19th at approximately 7 a.m. And the way he was found was because they were at the hotel, they were at the apartment complex. They had put him a notice on his door. This is what the manager told me, the lady manager, that they had put a note on his door letting him know that the next day his apartment was going to be sprayed for the pest control people were going to be there to spray his apartment. And so he did grab that paper. And so she knew that he knew. So the following day, it, it was 3 p.m. when he was scheduled to get his apartment sprayed. And so the manager lady, she got the master key because Brandon wouldn't answer. So she got the master key and she opened the door and she found him, because it was a studio. So she found him like sitting by a big black trash can, a big plush black. Brandon was sitting by a uh, big black trash bag, and he wasn't moving. And she said that she kept calling his name, Brandon, Brandon, and he didn't move. And so she knew something was wrong. So she went and she called the guy manager, and the guy manager quickly went over to Brandon's apartment, and he went up to him and just like tapped him on his like on his foot, and he noticed that Brandon didn't move, and he turned to the lady manager and said, "He's dead. Let's call the police." There was a bag next to Brandon, and it had oxys, what you call them, blues, oxys, M30s, all this terminology I'm learning. And so he had taken an oxy that was laced with deadly illicit fentanyl. And that's what killed him. And that's what the toxicology report states. And he had very little, he had very little alcohol in his system. But that wasn't what killed him. He was in the legal limit to drive. Um, that's how much little alcohol there was, but it was the illicit uh, M30 that killed my son. I got a call on Friday, but I was just like, "What's this number?" And then on Saturday is when I let Brandon's dad know that I had gotten this phone call. And then his dad's the one that said, you know what, something's probably not right with Brandon. And he said, call that number. And then so I did call that number, but we ended up driving to Brandon's apartment. And then I banged on the door and the window, and we were banging, and he wouldn't answer. So we're just sitting there in front of his door, and then I called that number again, and then it was the coroner's office, and then they told me that if am I Terrie Mirabal, and I said yes, and then they asked me questions about my son Brandon, and then they said that they're sorry to inform me that they have my son in the morgue, and that he passed away. It's the worst phone call a parent could ever receive. Brandon's dad got a call from the apartment management saying that we need to remove Brandon's items. Um, um, they didn't give us much time. They just said that we need to just hurry up, just get them out of there. And then we did. We drove to Brandon's apartment, and the manager lady that found Brandon deceased, um, told my mom and my sister that they just thought that he was an addict, that they didn't know that he was so loved. And there's this stigma right there for you, because that's why Brandon probably kept it a secret, because he didn't want to lose his job. And he didn't want us to worry about him starting up again. And he thought he could manage it, probably. We don't know. But we didn't know, and his job didn't know. And the apartment complex, they just thought that he was an addict, because they saw the bottles, the liquor bottles, and then the pipe. It was a clear pipe that was near Brandon, and the bag of the oxys that was near him, is what I was told. So we had to clear out his apartment really quick because they needed to rent it out. So we did. And
No investigation, I guess.
as far as I know, that they closed Brandon's case closed. When I got to the coroner's, they had told me that Brandon's case was already closed, that there was nothing, that Brandon's case was closed. And, you know, as far as with the coroner that was assigned to Brandon's case, she was not very nice. I just felt like I was bothering her when I had questions, and it shouldn't be that way. The takeaway here is hug your child, because you don't know what's going to happen. Tomorrow's not promised. Even 20 minutes from now is not promised. Love your child unconditionally. And just know that there will be problems. But what's helped me is my Heavenly Father, believing in faith. Brennan, he wouldn't want me to just hide under a rock. I feel Brennan wanted me to be here to talk to people. And if I could save one life by sharing Brandon's story, then that's a true blessing. So the Toby Mac song that I've listened to that's really been healing for me is the song 21. And it's about his son Truett that passed away at the age of 21. So that's why it's named 21. And it's very it helps. It's been helping me because he knows what I'm going through, him and his beautiful wife Amanda and his children. And it helps me because what I do is I change it to 22 because my son Brandon passed away at 22. So I say 22 years, what a beautiful loan. Thank you, Lord, for my beautiful son.